All right, shall we start? Shall we start, team?
Okay.
Alex, ready as well?
Okay. So, hello everyone. Thank you for being here with us today. My name is Annie, and I am the marketing manager at Duhno Marketing. I will start with a short introduction about our webinar, why we are doing it, and why we believe it is important to share our knowledge. Then I will introduce our two speakers, and after that, we will start our discussion. So feel free to react in the chat at any moment during this webinar. We will also have a 15 minutes Q&A at the end to answer all your questions. So why we are here today? So to give you a little bit of context, so Duhno Marketing helps foreign brands to grow in China, really short. And we noticed that a lot of customers come to us because they have issue with their TP. So it could be either a lack of transparency, communication problem, different objective, different strategy, etc. And this is why we decided to write a white paper about common mistakes when partnering with a TP. The second thing is we also noticed that our customers don't care enough about data. This is also why we asked some of our partners, such as Chaoli, Coolbeans, and KAWO, who are data experts in this sector, to help us to write this white paper. And following this white paper project, which will be finished by next week, I will send it to you by email when it's done. We also decided to organize 3 webinars, each with one of our partners. And today we are with KAWO, who will explain to us how data can improve TP's performance on social media. Okay, so today we are with Benoit Raoult, founder and CEO of Duhno Marketing, and Alex Duncan, co-founder and product lead at KAWO. So Alex, could you please introduce yourself in a few words to us? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ting. I am Alex. I'm from England. I'm actually in England right now. I'm the co-founder of KAWO, and I have a background in design and programming. We founded KAWO 10 years ago to be the Hootsuite for China. And today we help, I think it's about 700 different international brands to manage their social media in China. We especially focus on brand marketing and helping transparency.
Sorry.
We have somebody who's not muted. Yeah.
Yeah, please, people.
Looks like embarrassingly might be a member of my team that is not muted. So yeah, so KAWO focuses on helping teams to be more collaborative, more efficient, and more effective.
Okay, thank you, Alex.
That's it for me.
Benoit, could you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Alex, for joining me on this this presentation and having Ting to lead it. I'm the CEO and founder of Duhno. We have been running the company for 5 years now. As Ting mentioned, we want to help our clients to have and improve their relationship with their TP. It's quite important in the e-commerce sector. So we decided to give back to everyone what we are learning on an everyday basis. So thank you for being here today.
Okay, so let's start. So first questions. So how do you perceive TP management for foreign brands, and why are you legitimate to talk about the topic? Yeah, so Benoit, you can start if you want.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, allow me to start then. So at Duhno, basically, we have 2 ways to interact with TPs, and some of them hire us directly. So they hire us as an agency directly to have us to manage mainly social marketing works and activities. And we have some others that are coming through our clients, so brands. So we manage with brands, and then they come along with some of their partners, so distributors and TPs, and then we work together toward the goal. So I would say today, I believe I can speak about the topic in the sense that we start to have the feeling with all the case studies that we have been working on for the years that we understand pretty well the force at plays in those relationships and ways of working.
Okay, thank you. Alex, what about you?
So KAWO, I always say, is a bit like Switzerland. We're not your agency. We're not here to try and sell you some super cool, latest, greatest thing. We're actually here to try and help you to do what you currently do and do it better. So we're always very transparent and honest about what we see. We're not going to tell you that live streaming is the latest, greatest thing if we don't believe it is. And we're not, we're a software business. Our business is built out of scale. I've been here in China. Well, I have been living in China for 15 years, although I'm not there right now. And I have worked with many different brands over that time, and we've learned a huge amount over the years, and we get to see a huge amount of data. So we get to see what works and what doesn't. So we have a very good perspective across many hundreds of brands, across many industries. So that's hopefully why I can contribute today.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So let's jump with the second question. So I think this is more for Alex. So you are organizing social media data for your clients. Could you describe how you use these social media data?
So this is a great question. I have seen for years that people always want data. They always want data that they can't get, which is the first challenge we see with a lot of clients. They focus a lot on, oh, we want to see what our competitors are doing. And in reality, you can't see a lot of what is happening. You can't see what your customers are saying about you because it's certainly on WeChat, because it's hidden away inside moments. So the first thing I always recommend is to focus on what you can get and what data you can learn from. And then also to focus on getting insights from that data. So much of the time we see that data is put into a report, sent off to a client, and then nobody looks at it and really tries to understand what can we learn from this. And those learnings are both good and bad. There's often a lot of teams we see are trying to only focus on the good and maybe hide the bad. But actually, you can often learn more from the things that don't work than you can from the things that do work. It's often easier to pinpoint why something was not successful than it is to figure out why something was successful. So these are the key things we encourage our customers to do, is to actually use that data every week, every month, and actually learn about how that social data can tell you about what you're doing. Because the biggest thing you can change is the stuff you control, which is what you're actually doing on a week-to-week basis. Great to see Ryan joining the chat. Welcome, Ryan. Long time no see.
Maybe allow me to jump on this. I think I do know we try to work with KAWO as much as we can, and as you mentioned, Alex, you are the Switzerland's of all the agency space, I would say, and I appreciate that in a sense that it's neutral data. Is for us a feedback loop that is I would say brutal sometimes, but it's a reality, and it's shared with the client. So we are not hiding anything from the clients when we work with you, and that's what I appreciate, is that level of transparency that we get. And when we work with brands or TPs directly, we are not good at every single social post that we make. It's not true. Like we need to learn. Things are changing. We are in China. It's moving really fast. So saying you are always right, always sharp is not true. So I appreciate that level of transparency when we work together on the clients. And I would say also, what we try to bring with this data is something that you mentioned, is insights. Data for the sake of data is useless. And I believe in many cases, the brands through their TP are not leveraging or having enough data to transform that data into insights. And this is what is our role working with KAWO, is because we know what we are doing for the brands. We know that we are trying to reach a certain audience on certain platforms, and we are trying to achieve certain outcomes. And it's only because we link the data we collect with what we are doing that we can get some learnings. And I would say this is what I like to see and try to share with the brands today, that your TP can share with you data transparently, and sometimes if they don't, maybe use a tool like KAWO to make it more transparent to everyone, and then transform this data into insights.
I think another point that as I've just been reminded of as you've been speaking, Benoit, is that, I mean, if you look at this question in a different way, how can we improve the TP's performance on social media? So often when we work with organizations like TPs that are so sales focused, they try and treat social media as a sales channel. And actually, a lot of social media channels are not about sales. Your audience is not there just to buy from you, and sometimes not even to buy from you. They're there to entertain themselves. And so you have to be thinking a lot about the value that you're providing to your audience. And that's where it comes to brand building. We've seen that e-commerce in China can be very expensive when it comes to traffic acquisition. Well, social media is your chance to acquire traffic with hopefully a lower cost of acquiring that traffic, and also for that traffic to be more sticky. But the way that you make it more sticky and you build that loyalty is by providing value. Your social content should be fun. It should be interesting. It should be educating your audience. We see some TPs focus too much on trying to make a sale, and often that puts the customers off. I mean, we've all had that experience where we're walking down Huaihalu and somebody comes up to us with a flyer for a gym and they try to add our WeChat. You know, their desperation to sell to us makes us question the product they're selling to us. And I think that is very true for brands as well. If you seem too desperate and you're pushing too hard to sell, your customers will be put off by that. You need to engage them and build a more meaningful relationship with them. And there is no better place to do that than social media. You can be fun, you can be entertaining, you can speak to them in a way that connects with your audience. The challenge I think a lot of TPs and a lot of brands have is, obviously this space is very competitive and everybody's focused on the next quarter's revenue, the next quarter's ROI, like how do we make our yearly targets? But actually, when you take a step back, if you're serious about building a presence in China, you should be thinking about the next 5 or the next 10 years. China is still quite early on its growth trajectory. I don't know if anybody on this call has seen KAWO's Ultimate Guide, but we looked at the city tiers in China and we looked at the future potential growth in this market and the current rapid growth. You know, the internet in China is still growing massively. 22 million people came online in the past 6 months. So these are all new potential consumers. They probably first started using WeChat. Maybe at some point they'll start following official accounts. They're still a long way from buying your product. I'm talking about people in, you know, lower tier cities, second tier cities, third tier cities. These are potential future consumers, and you need to invest in that future. These are going to be your consumers for the next 4, 5, 6 years, and they're not going to click and buy immediately. Everybody's stunned by my
no, it's great outcome.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. So if you have any comments or question, you can ask in the chat. I will go to the next question. So what usage should a company do about all this data, and why is it useful for awareness, consideration, or conversion in the sales funnel? So who
Maybe
wants to? Yeah.
allow me to jump on that. I think, Alex, you kind of answers that question already a little bit before. On my side, I feel those data needs to be used to carefully target and address the people at the level they should be addressed. And like Alex said, not all the social media are made to be there for selling. And sometimes the TPs, I would say, are using every single social media platforms to do promotion. And I make the difference between promotion and marketing. I believe marketing, the job of a brand owner, brand manager, a product manager, is actually to make his brand resonate for a long term, because that's an amazing asset for the long term. And this entering a little bit of conflict sometimes with the TPs, because the TP's goal is actually to push boxes. Their KPI is not to raise up your brand, is actually to make the sales, like what you were mentioning, Alex. So I truly believe that by understanding and getting the feedback at a different level of awareness, consideration, and conversion, then if you understand in the social media which channel, which touch point is good for you for sales, then engage your TP on that sales channel. It should be there, because that's where he will make the best efforts, the best ROI, by being there to do the right promotions. And usually they know how to do really good promotion on the right channels. Then if you decide to use other types of channels and you detect by looking at the data that help you more on the long terms, or they help you to build your brands, then I believe it's more the job of the brand manager and eventually an agency, if you decide to work with an agency, to manage this specific social media. And it doesn't mean the team doesn't have to work together. We can see in our experience that if we work closely with the TP and with the tools like KAWO, then we all work in collaboration. And what we are doing at awareness level as the agency is serving the TP down the road, because it's easier for him to sell if people knows and understand the brand value proposition properly. So this is really why I believe we should use those data.
You make a great point. I think you make a great point, Benoit, about making it easier to sell down the line. Like, it's so expensive to sell things if you're having to pay for every click that is coming to your store. If customers are coming to find you, then that is much more much smoother process. And so, just looking at this question in a bit more detail, thinking about another challenge I see is that people often focus on the high level metrics across their whole account. But actually, you need to do something which I know you and your team do well, which is to break the content down and look at what different types of content are we creating. This is the benefit of having a separate agency to a TP, is that you have somebody purely focused on your content, somebody who's able to develop a more subtle strategy. Some of your content could be about sales, but then some of it needs to be targeted more towards a newer user. To give you an example that I've seen very close up this year, during the lockdown in Shanghai, I was actually in another city in China, a 4th tier city. And all of the people that I met there that were out running, they were very new to running. And so, they are, whereas in Shanghai, we will see people who've been running for years. You look at the Shanghai Marathon and the times get faster every year, because the running community is becoming more and more experienced. Still, in 2nd, 3rd tier cities, there are people who have just bought their first pair of running shoes in the last 6 months and are just doing their first 5K. They need very different content. They need very different advice, and they have very different questions to somebody who is trying to improve their marathon time from 5 hours to 4 hours, or 4 hours to 3 hours. Somebody who's trying to optimize their performance while avoiding injury. You've got some people who are just starting and they're trying to run 5K without stopping. That's a very different type of consumer. And so this is another thing that our social content should consider. But in order for us to measure this, we have to segment our content into smaller groups and target these different types of consumers. And as Benoit said before, test and fail. Like, if you're not failing, you're not testing enough. You're not taking enough risks. Like, you should be making mistakes and learning from them. I think that's the thing that a lot of teams are afraid of. They're afraid of stuff not working out. but that's, you know, when stuff doesn't work out, it means you tried something, and you can learn from it.
Can you please, you'll mute yourself? I think someone joined and is not muted. Yeah, thank you, Sharon, I think. Thank you, Alex, for what you were saying. I think it reminds me of a way that we are working as we tend to build a matrix of persona and challenge and funnel level. So you really detail that with your example of running really well. The persona that is running their first 5K has a different funnel, sales funnels, than the person that will be engaged into a marathon. So it creates different types of questions in their mind. And then when you address those questions on social media, you can build a matrix having your persona, the challenge those persona are facing, and then at which level of funnel you should post those media, those content. And then you will decide which media, which touch point is the right one for which kind of content. And this matrix for us allow us to really understand kind of all the content that needs to go out to have at least enough content for one brand out. And it's a lot of work already to build up that matrix and decide to fill up all the gaps in that matrix and understand what value they are bringing really to the clients. And as we say, China is changing really fast. So this matrix is constantly moving. So you need to restudy it and readjust to it because there are new platforms coming, there are new challenges coming to the people. So then you have to adjust to it. I think, Matthew, maybe there was kind of an answer to that questions that you have in the chat there by asking China being so fast-paced, things changing so fast with new tools, channels, or important event every few months. How can we efficiently plan a few years ahead? And I think, as you say, things are changing fast, so you need to adjust really fast. The branding will last. The branding is something that is for me not changing and not influenced by all those channel changes. So if as a marketer or as the TP, you are building the brand, then that will last. It's you then to be on the right platforms to meet your right audience, but to build your brand. So I don't know, Alex, you seem to be willing to react to that.
I agree with you completely. I think the fundamentals of building a brand and of marketing do not change. And it's so easy to get sucked into the details of a particular channel. You know, what music should we pick for Douyin? Like, how should we crop our images for, you know, whatever the channel is? It's so easy to get sucked into that and to forget about the bigger picture, which is how are we building this brand? And that really doesn't change in the long run. You know, building brands has been the same for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's all about building the trust with your consumer. And that means, as we said before, about understanding your consumer. What do they want? What journey do you need to take them on? If they are not in a position where they're ready to buy from you right now, then how do you get them to that place? What education do they need? You know, many of us on this call have witnessed the huge shift in towards drinking coffee in a city like Shanghai. You know, certainly when I first came to Shanghai, it just had a couple of Starbucks and they were not especially busy. Now we know it's the city with the most coffee shops on earth. And obviously that has been an education process that's happened over, I mean, Starbucks first entered China in 1999. You know, it's 20 plus years later. And we are, you know, it's a journey that we're still going on, because you go to a lower tier city, as I was in this 4th tier city earlier this year, and there were only 2 Starbucks and they were both quite empty. So clearly that journey is only just starting in the lower tier cities. And so there is so much future potential. I think this is one of the things that's really hard for a lot of Western brands to capture, is that China is not one country. It is a country the size of a continent. And there are so many different niches. I must admit, I really hate it when people make generalizations and they say, oh, you know, this about Chinese people. And I say, well, no, it's not possible to generalize. There are so many different personas, as you would not have a single marketing strategy for the whole of Europe, which is half the size of China. you also shouldn't have a single marketing approach for China, or you should at least focus on certain areas. It might be that your brand is only at this point in time suitable to for consumers in first-tier cities. We've had that with a customer before, where we worked with them and they were an education product, well, more of a learning and education product. And it was only really parents in first-tier cities who were ready to buy that type of product. Parents in lower tier cities were not, they maybe didn't have the free time, they maybe didn't have the way of thinking that made them a good consumer fit for that. So this brand was able to say, okay, we don't need to bother about anywhere in China other than Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen. This is where we need to start. We need to build our brand and our customer base there. We need to focus on word of mouth and really having loyal customers who come back to us and buy again and again as their children get older and they need new products. And so, as Benoit said, like, you've got to think about the long term. And this is the contrast between a social agency or a social media team and the TP. The TP is looking to hit numbers quarter by quarter. An agency gets to think more broadly about the consumer and how they can create multiple experiences.
Thank you, Alex. I think it's answering Arn questions a little bit that we have in the chat as well, where we have the question like, how does new brand in China go about securing some profitable revenue stream via social to create more room for community brands building? If on our side, we give a little bit of example to that, I would say it's in the way you plan your budget for the year when you're entering China for the first time. First, you need to have a budget. Going low cost to enter China is usually a mistake in all what we have observed. China is expensive to enter to, and as Alex just described, is like trying to reach 20 countries of Europe at the same time. And no one would say that they will have this kind of strategy in Europe. So why do they have it in China? So when we work with brands, we always try to first segments drastically where they should focus on. So Alex, just with your example, you say, okay, we can focus on first-tier cities for this educational product because the target is there. For another product, it might be second tier. Like we have a brand of coffee we had worked with, and their instant coffee brands was more targeting second tier and third tier cities than really active in first tier cities where everyone have access to Starbucks or other aspects. But in lower tier cities, for people, it was still sometimes harder to get access to a coffee. So it tends to work better over there. And then you have to focus maybe on one persona or two persona at a time. If you don't have the budget, don't try to reach 3, 4, 5, 6 different persona. Yeah. Focus on 1 and 2. And decide to work those persona really carefully and really well.
Another interesting aspect is, which is sort of, again, you've inspired me with this idea, Benoit, is the positioning. Like, there is, for the majority of markets, they're very highly segmented, very highly fragmented. If you look at fashion, the very largest fashion brands in the world, like H&M Group, have no more than 1% of the global market. So really figuring out what your positioning is within the market is also quite key as well. Are you aiming to be affordable? Are you aiming to be higher tier? Like, how are you wanting to be perceived by your customers? And that's, again, where your social media gets to speak to the customers in a much more complex way than you can do through adverts and traffic generation with your TP.
Good.
Okay. So Arn and Matthew, don't hesitate to tell us if it's clear or if you need further information. Let's jump to the next question. So according to your experience, what usage TPs are making of social media data?
You want me to go first, Alex, or you want to take this one?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. I would say, unfortunately, in our experience so far, we have seen TP looking a lot at what I will call vanity metrics overall, like the number of followers or the size of the reach of a specific content. This is, I would say, this is unfortunate in the sense that it's really high-level metrics and it's not going down toward a strategic plan, I would say. So some of the TP, and we have worked with some of really smart TP, they don't want those vanity metrics and they don't look at them. What they are looking at is among the followers, how many people are actually the persona they want to reach. And I particularly love that metrics because it's, for me, reflects the quality of the job of the TP or the agency working, is to say, are you addressing the right person? Because in China, the size of the market is really big. So if you spread out an advertising, it might be seen by millions of people, but you might not be addressing your right audience. So having the right followers in your social media accounts that are actually potential buyers because they are identified persona makes a complete difference. And the vanity metrics to reach millions of followers in a social media accounts is for me at least useless, in the sense that I prefer to have 4,000 people in a social media account that are potential buyer than having 10,000 that will never buy anything. So this is the first point, and I particularly love working with that TP that is really smart about this aspect, as always questioning, are we addressing the right persona? So this is the first one. And then the second one that I like on my side, and I see in some TPs, is the ability to move persona from one level of the funnel to another one. So the TP knows their job is to move from consideration to acquisitions, people that will actually act and buy. So they are in that level of the funnel, and they are always measuring this, trying to understand the people at different level. And it can be achieved inside Tmall. They have pretty good metrics to achieve this kind of things and understand at which level people are. And they were carefully looking at those conversion metrics, transition metrics, going from one stage of the funnel to another stage of the funnel. And I found those metrics particularly good because you can quickly detect where are your bottleneck in terms of engagement with your audience on the different media that you are using. So for us, it's really good metrics that we look at, because when we go back to the metrics, for example, I was earlier mentioning, then we know for each persona at which level they are and where they are blocked, for example. Or we can see, oh, this persona is going well for awareness. We capture many people at awareness level, but they never go down the funnel. What is blocking? What are we missing there? And then if you have good, I would say, CRM behind your social media, you can understand and talk with those people to understand what is blocking them to move forward in the funnel. And then you can address this by providing the right, for example, education content, like Alex mentioned, providing them some guidance about why they should make that decision, helping them to decide. And this is really helping and functioning. And then engaging the TP in that logic at the bottom of the funnels makes a huge difference.
Yeah, I mean, to take up on your point, one of the things that has always surprised me in China is how little attention is put onto retention or repeat marketing. One of the very first things I learned in marketing was that it's 5 times more expensive to get a new customer to buy the first time than it is to get a repeat customer to buy again. And so I guess we've seen so much a market that's been growing so fast. There's been so much focus on acquiring new customers, but as we're seeing the marketing, as we're seeing the market sort of become more stable, we should maybe think a little bit more about how we're going to retain existing customers and get them to become loyal to us. And again, social media is the best channel for building that loyalty. And so the other thing I would say specifically about how can TPs use social media data is it's actually possible to do a lot more than I think we see teams doing. Every single link that you put on social media through to your e-commerce can be tagged with an individual code, so you can see exactly which content is driving the actual engagement. You can also put other links around as well. So we've seen a big improvement in our website traffic from better management of our WeChat menu. And I know that this is really important too. For many brands, their WeChat official account is like their website homepage in China. And so making sure you have your WeChat menu well managed, you've got the links that answer the key customers' key questions, and you can tag all of those links as well. So you can see which items in your menu are driving traffic to your store or your other properties. And then you can improve your menu on a consistent basis too.
Okay. Benoit, you want to complete or it's fine?
No, I think it's fine. We have covered. I think we have covered that question a bit earlier, also on the fact that the TP is really sometimes focusing on the promotion aspect and a bit less on the marketing aspect. If I use these two vocabulary that I defined earlier in the talk, by having more drivers to push promotion. It's kind of normal that they are looking at some certain metrics that will make sense for them. So we also have to understand that they have a special look at the data. And as we were talking earlier, the data doesn't mean anything alone. It needs to be correlated and linked to what you are trying to achieve. And then you get some insights and learnings. So for the TP, it might be really good data sometimes for them, but then in the brand building, you have nothing. So it's good on the short term, you are doing a couple of sales, but if you stop spending hundreds of thousands of RMB in driving the traffic in Tmall, if you don't build your brand, then you end up, if you stop those media buy, then you have nothing. You have suddenly no sales at all. So I think to complete the job of the TP that is here to sales and engage at the lower level of the funnel, having everything that we have said in terms of brand building is also important, to have the right social media data used for this aspect. And sometimes some TP don't share those data that could be important for the brand. They will share only the data they are looking at by themselves, but it's not enough information for the brand to understand the full picture in China.
So we have a question in the chat from Damien about recommendations for leveraging social media in order to drive more conversions. I mean, most of my comments so far have been that you should not focus too much on conversions. You should think more long term. I think customers often don't want to be sold to too hard. You know, they want to discover in their own time, and they want to build more of a relationship with a brand. I think the brands that are more successful, you know, we will all as individuals have brands that we feel some kind of connection to, and it's worth thinking about why we feel that connection. What has that brand done to build that more meaningful connection that's made us a loyal consumer? I mean, as I sit here on a MacBook Pro with an iPhone in front of me, an iPad next to me, and an Apple Watch on my wrist, obviously Apple has built an incredible connection with me as a consumer that's lasted for, in my case, 20 years now. So what is it that we can do as brands obviously on a smaller scale to build those connections rather than just focusing on driving individual conversions? When it comes to conversions, you can think about social media is a great place to offer unique products and unique opportunities. So I know that a lot of brands do flash sales, or they do limited edition products on their social media to drive those conversions. And so that can be a good alternative. Your store can be the place where people can find everything. And then on social media, you can offer unique items to keep people following and to encourage them to follow, to give them a reason to follow you. When it comes to the tracking, I've seen there's a question here about is direct correlation. Many ecosystems block tracking. It's true. It is very hard sometimes to track the journey from, say, WeChat into the Alibaba ecosystem. But there are definitely things you can do with, if there is a link there on Weibo or something like that, all of these can be individually tagged. If you're putting something in the packaging with your for your customer when they receive the parcel, you can have a QR code that is unique to the order or unique to the packaging, and you can see who scans that QR code and see how effective your attempts to drive followers to drive repeat business. WeChat lets you create up to 10,000 trackable QR codes. So you have a huge potential to learn more about what you're doing and how effective it is.
Alex, can I quickly add a question next to that? Thanks for the explanation, and I think that was a very good answer. But one thing I was wondering, we've been talking about brand building, and if we want a lot of eyeballs and engagement with our brands, then we're probably driving impressions or we're driving engagement or whatever. But one thing I was uncertain of, and because we had it as a brand, we started out building a community. We put a lot of content online, but we didn't saw anything happen on, for example, Tmall or other platforms. If you cannot optimize on conversions, how do you know that you are targeting customers that are in fact interested in your product and not just follow you for the sake of following your content?
So I would have a couple of questions. One, over what timescale are you expecting content to deliver a return? Because that's also a key factor as well. Content is often a long-term investment. You're going to be putting yourself into the minds of consumers, and they're not necessarily going to buy immediately, but you're investing in a future, and you're investing in a slightly deeper relationship with the customer. So you can't necessarily expect social media to deliver fast results. And that's, again, where it comes back to this point about you shouldn't be looking at social media quarter to quarter. You should be looking at social media year over year and how you're building your following there. What was the second part of your question? I forgot midway through answering it. Can you remind me?
We're a fairly new brand, so we didn't have a store yet on, for example, Duhno. Not having a store as a disadvantage that you cannot optimize on conversions. I don't necessarily say those people need to buy on Duhno, but an algorithm gives you what you have as the algorithm to provide. And
yeah. And that is the big challenge of Douyin, is that it can be very hard to be sort of viral and snappy as a brand in order to work within the algorithm. So the other thing that I've seen as well is there can be a difference between creating content that engages people, but creating content that really is effective in building a relationship with customers. We've seen that with some of our customers where they say, well, if we want to hit our KPIs, we can easily just talk about the trending topics, the hot topics. But actually, that doesn't necessarily deliver the value to their brand, because in order to deliver value to their brand, they've got to be talking about the unique aspects, and they've got to be communicating in a way that actually connects with their audience. To give you an example from KAWO, one of the articles on our website that still delivers the most traffic to our website is how to create stickers for WeChat. Now, we just wrote that article because we thought it was a fun topic. I can tell you there's almost no overlap at all between creating stickers for WeChat and buying $10,000 a year social media management software for your company. And so that's a great example of how it's really important to understand your audience. Go and interview them, go and talk to them and see what are their pain points, what are their needs, how can you create the content that is going to connect with them and that is answering their questions that they have as consumers. And that's where, again, it's not about just measuring the total metrics. It's about being more nuanced and looking about what metrics are we getting on different types of content at different points in the funnel.
I will react to that as well. I think it's the work of the creative people to make the content social, because as Alex mentioned, people are here for entertaining themselves, especially on Douyin. They are here laying back and then watching some of those funny videos going on. If you do an advertising video to sell your products, even the algorithm will not certainly display it for long because they know that it doesn't interest anyone. So you have to be entertaining and fun and engaging with your audience. But at the same time, you have to answer some of their key questions or bring basically the outcome, the visions that you want to project your brands. When the user use your brand, you want to project them in a certain outcome. So the creatives are always working at trying to have on every single video or something that allows the people to understand what they will gain by being with your brand. And this is something that is really really hard, and this is why we need good creative people as well, is because we need to make that link that goes back to the sales goal, because marketing at the end is actually to achieve sales, but it has to be subtle. And I would say 10 years ago in China, we could argue about that by saying, oh, Chinese are not super educated to marketing, we can just target them. It's clearly finished. I would say that the young generations that everyone's want to target in China are actually super smart about marketing now and super sensitive. So we cannot take these people now, netizens, for fools. We have to be really smart and working on our brand building. Maybe in order to be respectful of the time, I think we have a last questions thing in the presentation, and then we can move back to question and answer.
Okay, so here's the last question. So for brands who are listening to us today, how should they manage their TP to extract the right market insight from social media?
Oh, wow. Nice one. You want me to go, Alex? You take it.
Well, I mean, I guess the thing is to focus on your own data and your own activity. The only thing we can control is what we do. We can't control the consumers and the way their behavior. So the only thing we can control is what we do and how we influence them. So one of the things I see a lot is a lot of teams focus a huge amount on what their competitors are doing. Now, there can be some use if you're in a very mature market, but ultimately you need to figure out how to make your own brand successful, and looking at your competitors will only get you so far. We had a fantastic case where I spoke to a customer of ours, and they said, we have this problem where our social media engagement is really good. We get lots of views and we get lots of reads. We get lots of reads and lots of engagement, but they're not the right type of consumers. They're consumers looking for 300 RMB products, when actually our core product range is 3,000 to 30,000 RMB. Like, how do we find those customers? And I thought that was such a fascinating case. I didn't have a great answer for them because I'm not an expert in their industry. But this is one of the dangers of looking at your competitors, is that you don't know, you may have different customers to them. You also don't know if their strategy is working. If you had been a competitor of this brand I just used as an example, you might think, wow, what they're doing is working really well because their public stats were great. But actually, it wasn't working for their business. It wasn't helping them reach the type of audience that were buying their main product range. And so this is a key thing as well, is to understand that the only thing you can affect is your own channels. And so to really look at your own data with a closer attention and not focus too much on what other teams are doing.
Yeah, to bring another angle to that, I would say first negotiate with your TP to have your own access to the data. So either through a tool like KAWO, either directly through the backend of the tool. But I would say it's fairly important that you have your own vision on the data, because when the TP presents you the data, I assume they have a bias on that data naturally. Not that they are making it by being mean or whatever. It's just they look at the data and they interpret the data by their own spectrum at the beginning. So having access to the neutral data, if I may say data, the raw data, is, I think, important for you to also look at those look at those data. This is, I think, this is a first point. Then on a second point, I would say you can engage your TP at looking at the right metrics if they are not. So you can guide them at decide to look at metrics that make sense and brings value to you. So typically the case that you were mentioning, like, hey, we have good social media impact, but we are not targeting the right audience. So everything we are doing on social media, if you look at vanity metrics like followers, prints, engagement, hey, everything is super good. But at the end, it's not driving any sales. So the sales is relatively, let's say, low, or either relying on other tools that you're not looking at when you look at the data. So it can be kind of strange or struggling if you don't have an holistic vision also on what all the activities that the TP is doing, and in order to make the sale. So I would say encouraging the TP to understand the value of the raw data and then the value of the interpreted data, because you can take decisions and they can be the wrong decisions about the data. But if you document those decisions on a regular basis with them, then you can also learn. So I would say on this, we have a clear case where a case in the fashion business where we have taken an account that was there just to be there and was actually managed by a TP, and we took it over. And in about a year and a half, we started to see how we started to influence the other accounts that we were following as competitors. And we started to see some of those accounts copying some of the things that we were doing. So it's really also interesting to see how we influence each other's. And we thought, oh, that idea that the other one is doing is super good or not good or whatever. So I think that testing, you become a leader of your market segment, market niche, instead of being a followers of what the other are doing. So tracking what the competition is doing makes sense, but testing more than them will help you to achieve better things. So I would say help your TP to understand that, because this is not necessarily where their strong points are at, and they might need guidance to be better. So simply help them.
Okay, thank you. So yes, now is the Q&A session. So I don't know if we have further question to ask, either by chat or.
I think we had a couple of questions along the sessions already. Any additional specific questions there? Or remark, Alex, maybe you have another compliment that you want to make. Huh?
Yeah. I have, I don't think I have anything else to say. I mean, yeah, I guess I often find it confusing how much teams, their desperation to jump on the latest new thing, when actually the latest great newest thing is often quite uncertain, and often the best results come from doing the existing stable things well. So for example, there are great opportunities to be had from building a great WeChat account, whereas something like live streaming is a lot more uncertain, it's a lot less mature. And so I always recommend teams to focus on the fundamentals.
Good advice. Yeah, we've seen many teams trying to spend a lot of money and times on doing, but they didn't know how to harvest that result after that. So a lot of money thrown into new tools, but for what purpose?
A lot of the audience on Douyin is quite price sensitive as well. So again, when we come back to, what builds a brand, building a brand is comes from having customers who seek you out and are willing to pay the price that you want to sell your product at. If you're always having to discount or offer incentives to get people to buy through a live stream, you're in danger of reducing your profit margin and potentially of damaging your brand.
Yeah, I don't think we have other questions, right, for the moment.
Maybe one last question, if I can.
Sure.
How do you, maybe a little bit off topic, but always good to ask. Maybe there are others who experience the same thing. When you come from a very data-driven environment, an e-commerce company in Belgium, and everything is about finding profitable growth. So the one thing on the mind of your founders is ROAS or ACOS or ROI or whatever. How do you convince people to keep on investing in China if after 6 to 12 months you might not see the take-up that you would have wanted to see? Any arguments?
I mean, yeah, you have to think of China as a long-term investment. If anybody is wanting to see an ROI within 6 to 12 months, then they don't have the right attitude or the balls for this market. You have to invest for the long term. There is no larger or faster growing market probably on earth right now, and so you've got to really ask your team back in Belgium, are you serious about China, and are you willing to take the time that it takes to develop in this market? Nothing that was ever worth doing was ever quick and easy, I would argue.
Yeah, I have a little bit the same thing. Is when we discuss with brands willing to engage with us for 3 to 6 months, especially after COVID, we've seen a lot of those like saying, "Oh, we want result in 3 months or 6 months to understand how we can work together, maybe on the long term after that." The reaction I have is usually if you want to, let's say, enter or re-enter China, because sometimes it's also about re-entering China properly, trying to have a vision to 2 to 3 years in terms of investment. So a capacity of investments for 2 to 3 years to start to see results is usually reasonable in what I have observed. So of course you can have examples of success stories in a really, really short scheme. But I have discussed with Chinese entrepreneurs in the fashion space, and in order to understand for them how much they make as an investment to consider building a brand in China. And they say, until we spend 20 million RMB, we haven't built anything in China. And you can do that basically in 6 months, or you can do it in 6 years. Doesn't really matter, but you have to spend that amount of money to basically have a brand name in China that resonates with part of the audience that you want to attract. And I found that super fascinating number because it's a big number. 20 million RMB is not small. But it's basically a Chinese entrepreneur in the fashion space considered they have to spend that money to make a name in that space. So those are examples that might help, but I think it's going in the same direction than what Alex was saying.
I'm always conscious that anything that goes from 0 to 100 in 6 to 12 months can also go back to 0 just as quickly. And generally things that are built more slowly over time are built to last.
Yeah. Shall we conclude to respect people's time? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we will conclude here as we are running out of time. So thank you, Benoit and Alex, again, for your expertise. It was a very enriching discussions. So yeah, if you have further questions, you can still contact our expert by email. You can also register to our 2 next events, so same topic, but with different experts. So on September 15, so we will welcome Daphne Teun from Chaoli, and on September 29th, we will have Alexandra Yao from Cool Beans. So please scan and register. And so the link to the webinar will be shared later next week, along with the white paper. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you. Great joining.
Bye-bye.